Okay, now we are supposed to move to 업무방해, right? Because this is not really the syllabus. This is really the table of contents, right? The syllabus gives you a different order of things, so we are following the syllabus. So far we just follow this because the syllabus, it was the same as the syllabus, but now the syllabus is a little bit different. So now we are going to seventh week material on the resource book, not the 6th week, 7th week, and that is Williams case, and here the question is what can be the basis for suppressing or punishing speech. If you read Williams' case, here the court said that mental health, mental safety, or threatening mental health or safety cannot be the basis for punishing speech. This is a Washington Supreme Court, not a US Supreme Court. The Washington Supreme Court is following the ruling of the US Supreme Court on true threat. What is true threat? On resource book page 169. Definition of true threat has emerged in the wake of Watts. A true threat is a statement made in a context under such a circumstance wherein a reasonable person would foresee that the statement would be interpreted as a serious expression of intention to inflict bodily harm upon or to take the life of another individual. So in Watts' case, if you look at the paragraph above that, there's a description of the Watts case. So the left column, the bottom, Robert Watts, left column of page 169, the bottom, Robert Watts was convicted of threatening President Lyndon Johnson by publicly declaring at an anti-war rally, if they ever a rifle, the first man I want to get in my sights, 가늠쇠라고 얘기를 했었죠, is LBJ, Lyndon Johnson himself, the president. So that was not considered punishable under the law by the Supreme Court, saying, oh, that could not be a serious expression of actually killing Lyndon Johnson. Okay. Now, following that, the Washington Supreme Court found the Washington law unconstitutional when it was used to punish this employee trying to get his wages paid by threatening the employer. He said, "Motherfucker, you better give me my check," right? And then he tried to jump, right? He reached out to the employer, and the court thought that that was not really threatening enough, and before getting there, the court talks about overbreadth of the law, meaning there is a over inclusion, right? So if you look at page 170, the left column bottom, well, let's go to the whole reasoning. If you look at page 169, the right column at the bottom, the court says, "The state is correct in its observation that speech is unprotected if it is likely to produce a clear and present danger." The clear present danger test was originally promulgated by the Supreme Court in Schenck. We read Schenck together. Okay. There, Justice Holmes reasoned, "The question in every case is whether the words used are used in such circumstances and are of such a nature as to create a clear and present danger that they will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent." While the clear present danger test has evolved since its inception in 1919, the underlying theory has not. The Brandenburg Court asserted its commitment to the proposition that the constitutional guarantees of free speech and free press do not permit a state to forbid or proscribe and prevent랑 같은 말이죠. Advocacy of the use of force or of law violation, except where such advocacy is directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. Now, the paragraph below, the state, here is the state of Washington, asserts protecting private citizens from malicious threats of substantial harm to physical or mental health is a compelling state interest. So the state is saying, hey, mental shock is clear and present danger. If somebody says things that is likely to cause mental shock, we have constitutional power. We are allowed by the Constitution to prevent that by law. Let's look at what the law actually says. Page 167, the right column, right in the middle. Page 167, right column, right in the middle. A person is guilty of harassment if, without lawful authority, the person knowingly threatens to cause bodily injury in the future to the person threatened or to any other person, or maliciously to do any other act which is intended to substantially harm the person threatened or another with respect to his or her physical or mental health or safety. Now, the question is whether mental health, right? Protecting the mental health can be the basis for punishing speech. When does your mental health suffer? What do you hear that denigrates, that undermines your mental health? I think you can suffer mental health problem just talking to your parents. You can suffer mental health problem talking to your husbands and wives or lovers and boyfriends, girlfriends. If mental health is something, so actually we have there are two reasons that this statute is found unconstitutional. So we are missing a subtitle there, or we are missing a title there. If you look at page 168, all the way at the top, page 168, all the way at the top, write in vagueness. Okay, vagueness. So on the left column, write a section title, vagueness. There the court is saying, hey, mental health, what's meant by mental health? Right? All the way at the left column, like 4 paragraphs down, Williams argues a reasonable person is left to guess at what conduct is prohibited under the mental health aspect of this statute. For example, does the statute prohibit a person from making threats which cause others mere irritation, emotional discomfort, or does it only prohibit those threats which cause others to suffer a diagnosable mental condition? A plain reading of the statute provides no answer. So, even when you talk to your loved ones, they can be very disappointing. And they can be very possessive of you. And without making any threats of bodily harm or financial harm, they can undermine, they can affect your mental health. And if you read the statute will criminalize such speech as well, such conversation as well. This is what the court sees as a problem. So now we are in good position to make comparison to Korean law of interference with the business. Section 314, I believe. 그렇죠? 314조죠? 업무방해죄. 맞습니다. The law says interfering with business by deceit, 위계, or 위력. 위력이 뭘까요? 위력, 위자는 보면 시위할 때 위자거든요. 보여진다는 거죠. 힘이라는 거고. So show of force. Now, let me say a few things about, now before we get into whether this, so now the question I want to pose to you is whether this law satisfies clear and present danger test. Interfering with the business by deceit or show of force. Not with the force, but show of force. Okay? Think about that. Now, before we get into that, I want you to give you a little bit of a history lesson on how this provision how this provision ended up in the Korean statute. The statutory provision like this exists, as far as I know, only in Japan and Korea. Why Japan and Korea? It has a lot to do with the fact Japan and Korea went into rapid industrialization in 20th century, not 19th century like in other major countries like France, Germany. They all industrialized in 19th century, but Japan and Korea were latecomers. And during the rapid industrialization of European majors, the countries there saw unions as a threat to industrialization. So they had these laws that ban unions. They made it criminal for workers to unite. Workers to unite in, striking, not working, refusing to work, demanding wage increases. You'll be surprised that even UK had the law, criminal syndicalism act. Syndicalism means union, criminal. So they saw unions as a criminal organization. So these laws were later, of course, abandoned, were abolished in European countries. But before they were abolished, as Japan inherited German's legal system, they inherited interference with business provision, and that was transplanted to Korea during the colonial period. That's why it has this cryptic provision interfering with the business. You will wonder, you can go to prison for 5 years or 7 years, 5 years, if you interfere with somebody else's business. But if you interfere with somebody else's studying, then you are not risking any penalty. If you are interfering with somebody else's playing or somebody else's leisurely activities like playing soccer or games or singing a song, then it's not a crime. But if you interfere with another's business, then it becomes a huge crime. Why? Because this was a law originally intended to target unions. So by business, what they meant was employer's business, the management's business. So these are one of the laws, like truth defamation law, that European countries used to have and abolished, but somehow Japan and Korea never caught up. That's why if you look under Section 314, more than half the indictments for Section 314 are against the unions or members of unions. And how are they doing it? Well, there is not much deceit, but there is this show of force. The idea is that if one worker says, oh, I'm not going to work tomorrow because my wage is too low, that's not a sufficient force to the management. But if 10,000 workers together, right, all at the same time say, hey, we're not going to work tomorrow unless you raise the wages, then it becomes a sufficient show of force. And the employer will have to raise the wages. And raising the wages is considered interfering with the business. So, I mean, how does show of force, right? How does how is raising wages because of the pressure of a large number of employees, how does that become a clear and present danger? Just think about that. Now, if there is a threat of a bodily harm, right, then it's a crime. I mean, it's a separate crime, right? 뭐 강요죄, 공갈죄 되겠죠. 뭐 그렇게 해서 금품을 가져간다면 강도가 될 수도 있고. If there is a threat of bodily harm, then it is a crime, and that is a clear and present danger. But here, the unions are getting their demands not by threatening bodily harm, but only by threatening what they have right to do. Only by threatening what they are allowed to do, which is not working for a day. See, workers are not slaves. It's not a crime not to work a day. Just as it's not a crime for you to miss a class, I mean, you are responsible for your grade. You miss all your classes, and you will get a lower grade, and you have freedom to do so. You have freedom to receive lower grade by not attending classes. You have freedom to fail a class by not attending the exam. Workers have right to miss work days and, you know, not getting paid. But here, the law is criminalizing workers exercising their right to collective action. Because why? It is a show of force. It is show of force, and how is that bringing about the result? How is it bringing about the harm, which is you know, pay raise? I mean, the law seems to think that pay raise is a harm. Now, is it through physical coercion or mental coercion? Mental. Because, you know, if many workers all at the same time say, oh, we'll not work tomorrow, then the employer will be mentally shocked. Yes, I mean, he will suffer financially, but I mean, that is part of the business. If employers don't come to work, of course you suffer financially. That cannot be something that the government needs to protect with the criminal law. Yes, there were times that it was a crime to miss school too. Actually, there were times in the US and Europe where police will arrest the students who are outside the schools during school hours. It was during the time that unions were also banned. But now we don't believe in such laws. We believe that those laws are unconstitutional. So as long as workers are doing what they are allowed to do, financial harm that the employer suffers should be just eaten up as part of the business, part of the reality of running a business. The only thing that remains is the mental shock that employer suffers. That's how it is related to Williams' case. See? Williams' case is saying mental health, mental shock. That in itself cannot be the basis. I mean, it doesn't even say mental shock, it says mental health. Worker striking will give headache to the employer. Well, a headache is a mental disease. A headache is a mental health problem, of course. But can that be the basis for criminalizing not showing up at work? So many commentators have commented on this, saying, how can missing a work become a crime, right? Yes, if all workers miss work at the same time, yes, it will cause financial harm, but the Constitution guarantees workers' right to collective action. If each worker can miss a workday, then many workers can miss a workday on the same day. So financial harm cannot be the reason, cannot be the basis for criminalizing their absences. The only remaining concern is mental health of the employer. It's like that's what this term show of force means. Oh, so many workers not coming to work tomorrow? Oh, I'm so afraid. Okay? I feel fear. I'm afraid of losing my business. I'm afraid of my business going bankrupt. That's the only remaining reason for criminalizing worker strike. So many people have commented on this, saying this law basically considered workers as slaves, people who have no right to miss workdays. So 2011, a famous railroad union case, the Supreme Court case, this Korean Supreme Court. In railroad union case, the Supreme Court narrows the application of Section 314 to union activities, saying it becomes a crime only when unions strike unexpectedly. 그래서 이제 전격성 요건이 여기서 나오죠. yes, workers missing work days is part of the business, but to be fair, you have to give the employer time to prepare for the strike. You cannot just strike like in the next day, because the employer will not have time to prepare, like hire some other people to make up for the missing workforce. Is this good, bad? Well, as long as Section 314 continues to be used against the union, I think this is a progress, because it narrows the application. But is it good enough? I don't think so. Because the only reason unions exist is to put pressure on the employer. That's the whole reason. The whole reason unions are guaranteed is because they can show force. What kind of force? Well, force to strike like on a day's notice, force to strike unexpectedly, present a continuous threat to the employer that you better treat us right or we'll strike. We can strike tomorrow. We can strike right away. Who is the father? Who is considered the father of capitalism or free market? Father of market economy.
Smith.
Yes, Adam Smith. If you read to the end, towards the end of his book, The Wealth of Nations, 국부론이죠. There is a chapter in which Smith says, he talks about 보이지 않는 손, invisible hand, 분업과 협업, division of labor, all of that. Towards the end, it says, all I said before is true, but what will happen is the workers will be excluded under the free market system. Because workers will be forced to do things that do not benefit them a lot, but benefit only the employer greatly. Yes, workers will benefit. Workers will, earn wages, but the employers will earn much more. And because of that, workers will continue to sell themselves at low wages, and their standard of living will continue to decline. So he said, the father of free market said, there has to be laws protecting workers' right to collective action. Workers should be allowed to pressure the employer to give them guarantee them humane conditions of employment. So even in the market economy, workers' right to collective action is a guaranteed basic right. And that means they should be able to do it predictably or unpredictably. I mean, when you say you have freedom of speech, that means you can say the damn thing now or tomorrow, anytime you like. Now, because we didn't work hard, constitutional scholars especially in Korea did not work hard on Section 314, what ended up happening was now it's being used to suppress other activities as well. So newspaper consumer boycotts. 이게 뭐 언론 소비자 주권 캠페인 이라고 해서 조선중앙동아에 대해서 불매운동 보이콧하는 사람들인데, so this was a boycott against 3 major daily newspapers in Korea, and they were punished under Section 314. Well, what did they do? They made phone calls to the offices of the newspapers, and they complained about, how unprofessional and unprincipled their journalism is. And the prosecutors and the court agreed. The prosecutors indicted, and court agreed that, hey, that's a show of force interfering with the business of the newspapers. So how is that, what legal interest is being undermined? What legal interest is being destroyed when consumers call companies to complain about their products? Let's say you don't like Samsung Galaxy because they exploded. So if you make a phone call, maybe you are not interrupting their business, maybe you are not interfering with their business, but if you make 10 phone calls, 20 phone calls, then it becomes a crime. Well, that is the theory. That is exactly the theory that will be, I think, struck down by the Williams Court or the US Supreme Court. Why do companies have so many phones in their offices? Well, to receive phone calls from their customers or their prospective customers. All the advertisements, open up your newspaper right now, any advertisement will have a phone number on it, because the advertisement is there to sell something, to persuade the consumers to make that phone call. So consumers called, yes, said something bad about their products, but how does it become a crime? Yes, a lot of phone calls went into it. So, okay, right now, a lot of people are calling 대한항공, Korean airline, right now, for, frankly, I personally think it's not that a big deal that, somebody went into a rage at a work meeting. She just got angry. She didn't hit anybody. She just threw a cup of water. Still, yes, it's despicable. But is it a crime that requires 15 hours of interrogation? I don't know. But for whatever reason, people don't like both sisters and their father, and they are boycotting Korean airline. So they are calling Korean airline and telling bad things about the company and the company's leaders. So if many people do it, then that becomes a show of force. And then making the employers endure negative comments, that will, of course, affect the morale. 사기죠, 사기. 종업원 사기를 떨어뜨리겠죠. So is that a clear and can that be a clear and present danger that justifies suppression of speech? According to Williams Court, no. Mental health is, including mental health as the basis, or protection of mental health as the basis for punishing speech, is just too broad. Okay, so I talked about this. Now there is yet another case of interference with the business against this online persona named Drukin. So apparently he organized people, all used a special software to add comments or press likes or dislikes on comments attached to newspaper articles, news articles on Naver. Okay. So he either organized people to, he told people, go to that news article and write negative comments or positive comments on that news article, or press likes or sometimes dislikes on the comments supporting or opposing the theme of the news article. He's being criminally prosecuted for interference with the business. Whose business do you think? Naver's business. What interest is being protected there? It's not physical integrity, right? It's not physical security. It's not mental health, because naval is not like, there is nobody, no naval employee like watching the comments on the news articles. There is no opportunity to be shocked by increase of some positive comments or negative comments, or changing of comment rankings, right? Because if one comment receives a lot of likes, the ranking goes up, and later it goes, they have a special box at the top, best comment attached to this news article, and if it gets enough likes, it goes all the way up in the ranking. But the change of the ranking or the posting of comments, it takes place without awareness of any naval employee. So it's not mental health. It's not mental shock. the only interest is neighbors' interest in maintaining the comment section as some space for free discussion without use of software, without use of organization. What is that? What exactly is that interest, right? I mean, when you open a comment section, when you open 게시판이죠, 게시판. Of course, if some people, have the same strong feeling, share the same strong feeling, they'll come in and post many comments of the same nature. They'll organize themselves into doing so. And if they have a lot of members, they all agree that certain comments should be receiving a lot of likes, then of course they may use software to, instead of having each one press like, they'll have the software do the menial work of pressing likes buttons. So you can see that the way Section 314 is structured, it can be used to criminalize a lot of things that people are doing. Let's say we have a final exam, and we are supposed to turn in by the end of the third hour. You don't. You turn in 10 minutes late. Well, that's interfering with the business of a professor who has to do fair grading. I think the problem comes from both ends. Interference with the business is not a crime unless the method of interference is illegal, right? Yes, if you interfere with somebody else's business, or if you interfere with somebody else's not just business, somebody else's leisurely activities, like picnic. If you interfere with somebody's picnic or somebody's wedding or somebody's 동창회, it should become a crime if the method of interference is illegal. For instance, threatening, right, physical harm. If you interfere with somebody's wedding or whatever activity with physical harm, of course it becomes a crime. But here, deceit is fine, but show of force, right? Not even physical force. This is more like a show of numbers, right? So exactly what harm is being prevented by this provision is not vague. I mean, it is vague. It's not clear. And also, the harm that's being prevented I mean, the part that's clear is just not harmful enough to justify the criminalization. Okay, any question, comment on interference with the business law and how it can be reviewed, how it can be evaluated under the American constitutional law?
What do you think of this kind of cases then? Like you own a blog or like a site or something.
Okay.
And somebody just comes in and
Okay.
just writes random comments. I mean, not about like 명예훼손 or like will.
Okay.
He just writes random things.
Like advertisements.
Yeah, a lot of people just comes in, like 100 people comes in, and
Right.
they're like organized and they just want to like harm your internet sites, and they just put random things. And what kind of thing you can do to them?
Well, you can erase them, right? If you are the CSOP, if you are the system operator, you can erase them all. And if you know their IDs, you can take away their privilege to post comments. I mean, that's why if you want to run, I mean, you can choose. You can choose to run an open bulletin board, or you can choose to run a closed bulletin board. Closed bulletin board requires you to log in before you post a comment. And if you keep posting, usually advertisement of porno sites or gambling sites or drug sites, if you keep doing that, you know the ID, you can shut down that account. That's what Naval does. Naval is running a closed bulletin board account. So it's something Naval can very easily do. I'm not saying those activities are all desirable. I'm just saying it is something that private parties can just deal with by taking away the accounts. But here, the government is coming in and punishing speech, because posting a comment is speech, without really defining what exactly the harm is. I mean, what is exactly the harm when you post a pornography ad in your comment? Who is being harmed? If you don't like it, you can choose not to see it, right? 아니 그게 해악이면 강남역에 가서 그 찌라시 돌아다니는 거 그것도 다 손해배상 할 수 있어야죠. Oh, my eyes were harmed, right? You know what 찌라시 is? Leaflets, little brochures. Well, I think if that is a workable lawsuit, then I think many newspaper websites with all their advertisements of usually sex-related operations, they all have to pay some money to everybody who visits that website. Okay, any other question, comment? Okay, now let's go to page 172 of the source book. NAACP versus Alabama, Talley versus California. Let's see. Okay, NAACP versus Alabama. What happened there? Alabama, by the way, is the state, if you remember, where the police arrested Martin Luther King how many times? Better be careful, you'll be sued. Of course, the U.S. Supreme Court said you have right to make a mistake about those things, unless you had actual malice, unless you knew that Martin Luther King was arrested only 4 times, but just to make Alabama police look bad, you are saying 7 times, right? Unless you are doing that, you are okay, not just criminally, but also in a civil lawsuit. So there, state of Alabama, of course, didn't like NAACP, which is the organization now you should be familiar with, because you saw their activity through the movie, and also you saw them, you read about them in New York Times versus Sullivan. And Attorney General of Alabama filed a lawsuit to get the member list of NAACP. And the state court actually ordered, if you look at page 173 at the top, the state court ordered the production of a substantial part of the requested records, including the membership list. Why do you think Alabama state wanted to do this? Well, they wanted to find out how many people and who are participating in NAACP. For what purposes, though? Well, before we do that, so what does the Supreme Court say? The U.S. Supreme Court said, so the state court, Alabama State Court said, NAACP, you are ordered to disclose the membership list. And the Supreme Court came in and said, no, you don't have to. Why though? What is at stake here? If you look at page 173, the resource book, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we think that production order in the respects here drawn in question, production은 이제 생산이 아니라 제공, 이걸 production. 사실 변호사들이 프로덕션이라고 할 때는 문서 제공. 그래서 민사소송법에서 뭐 문서송부 촉탁명령 이런 거 프로덕션 오더라고 그래요. 미국에서는. So, we think that the production order must be regarded as entailing the likelihood of a substantial restraint upon the exercise by petitioners, members of their right to freedom of association. Now, this is the connection between free speech and privacy. Petitioner has made an uncontroverted showing that on past occasions, revelation of the identity of its rank and file members, rank and file은 이제 평회원을 rank and file member라고 합니다. 왜냐하면 rank and file이 그러니까 종횡, rank는 종, file은 이제 줄. 그러니까 줄 맞춰 서야 될 사람들을 얘기하는 거죠. rank and file이라고 그러면. 그래서 이제 평회원을 얘기할 때 rank and file member라고 그래요. So rank and file members has exposed its members to economic reprisal, 경제적 보복, loss of employment, threat of physical coercion, and other manifestations of public hostility. You saw that in the movie. NAACP members will be subject to lynching. Under these circumstances, we think it apparent that compelled disclosure of petitioner's Alabama membership is likely to affect adversely the ability of the petitioner and its members to pursue their collective effort to foster beliefs which they admittedly have the right to advocate, and that it may induce members to withdraw from the association and dissuade others from joining because of fear of exposure of their beliefs shown through their associations and the consequences of this exposure. Okay. So now that in itself is not sufficient justification to strike down the state court's production order, right? Because I mean, all the Supreme Court is saying is, oh, there is a basic right at stake here. There is something very important that's being undermined here if the membership lists are disclosed. Membership list, I mean, yes, membership lists were secret beforehand, but now it's being asked to be, it's ordered to be submitted to the court. So I guess there's a privacy interest, right? Because you are taking something that is private and opening it up. But other than that, there's another interest. What is it? Freedom of association. And freedom of association is much like freedom of speech. Because by joining an association, you are making a statement. And by making a statement, you are actually joining a group of people sharing the same thought. So here is freedom of, here is a basic right that's as important as freedom of speech. Why is it important for the Supreme Court to talk about this? Well, because now the private interest, I told you that in any constitutional law question, always the question is balancing between public and private. So it's the public interest that's being achieved by some law or some government action. Whether this is important enough to justify infringement on private interest. 그래서 private interest, 사인을 말하는 거예요. privacy 얘기하는 게 아니라. Now, once private interest includes freedom of speech, what happens? Then the standard of review, level of scrutiny suddenly changes. Now it becomes strict scrutiny. I told you that clear and present danger test is a form of strict scrutiny, because you require some very important government interest to allow suppressing that activity. Now, below, so two paragraphs down, the court says, we turn to the final question, whether Alabama has demonstrated an interest in obtaining the disclosure it seeks from petitioner, which is sufficient to justify the deterrent effect which we have concluded these disclosures may well have on the free exercise by petitioners members of their constitutionally protected right of association. What a terrible sentence. Well, try to decipher that again. Read that a couple times. It's a long sentence, but this is how they used to write back in 60s. Such a subordinating interest of the state must be compelling. You saw the term compelling before. When did you see compelling? Well, when it's a strict scrutiny, right? Now that the Supreme Court said, hey, there is a freedom of association involved, now you must have a really, really important business here to be able to open up the membership list. Then the court says, now we can talk about why the Alabama prosecutor wanted this, right? Basically, every organization doing intrastate business, intrastate meaning within the state, every organization doing intrastate business had to register with the state of Alabama. I guess it must have been right. So if you look at page 173, all the way at the bottom 4 lines, the exclusive purpose was to determine whether the petitioner was conducting intrastate business in violation of the Alabama Foreign Corporation Registration Statute. So basically there was a law that a foreign corporation, foreign as not like non-American, but non-Alabama, any organization based outside Alabama has to register if they want to do intrastate stuff. So the prosecutors are saying, hey, to do that we need a membership list. And what does the court say? You don't need a membership list to figure out what NAACP is doing. I mean, NAACP is doing things in an open manner, publicly. Actually, that's the whole reason NAACP exists. to make public statement about racism. You can figure out, I mean, why do you have to know who the members are if you can pretty much know what the organization is doing? And given the stake, given the requirement that the prosecutor have to show compelling interest to interfere with compelling interest, compelling enough to justify interfering with people's right to freedom of association, this need to look at membership list just to see whether NAACP activities are interested or not is not persuasive. This need for the list is not persuasive, especially when the requirement is very strict. So that is the NAACP versus Alabama. How about Talley versus California? Okay, the statute was a Los Angeles ordinance prohibiting any person to distribute any handbill which does not have printed on the face of thereof the name, address of the person who printed, wrote, compiled, or manufactured it. Why do you think the ordinance 이제 조례를 얘기하는 거죠. 지방자치 조례. Why do you think the city of Los Angeles passed this law? 그러니까 말하자면 찌라시를 배포하려면 저자, author's name has to be on that leaflet, right? 핸드빌, 유인물을 말하는 거죠, 유인물. On that, what does the court say? It is urged that this ordinance is aimed at providing a way to identify those responsible for fraud, false advertising, and libel. But such an identification requirement would tend to restrict freedom to distribute information, thereby freedom of expression. Anonymous pamphlets, leaflets, brochures, and even books have played important role in the progress of mankind. Persecuted groups throughout history have been able to criticize oppressive practices either anonymously or not at all. Not at all. Right? 익명권이 되지 않는 상태에서는 비판 자체가 불가능했다. Anonymity has sometimes been assumed for the most constructive purposes. Okay. So it's not just political persecution that anonymity prevents. Wuthering Heights, 폭풍의 언덕이죠. Masterpiece by Emily Bronte. She sent the manuscript of the book to 6 publishers. It all got turned down because it came with a woman's name. So she created this pseudonym, Acton Bell. Acton sounds male. Immediately it got published and became so popular. That's what the court means when they say anonymous pamphlets, leaflets, brochures, even books have played an important role in the progress of mankind. Another meaning, another example is Federalist Papers. This was a periodical. This was a group of papers written one at a time, from time to time, by two anonymous writers to discuss what the Constitution should say. This was time before the Constitution was passed. So these two anonymous writers publicly discussed what should be included in the Constitution. Now we know who the authors are. James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, which were one of the very important people involved in drafting the Constitution. But they did that anonymously, and the Federalist Papers became popular. They did that anonymously because they didn't want the papers to be read with prejudice. Because once the identity is known, then some people will discount and distort. So that's another example of how anonymity contributed to the progress of mankind. There are many pseudonyms, 가명이죠. There are many pseudonyms that provided breathing space for many famous writers. The most famous example is Voltaire. 볼테르라고 하죠. That was not his real name. Émile Zola was also anonymous name, pseudonym. The American writer, very popular with the Koreans, O. Henry, that's also pseudonym. Also, if you look back in Korean history, 일제시대, 군사독재 시절, under Japanese colonial rule, under military dictatorship rule, the fighters for independence and democracy, they all produced stuff under anonymity or pseudonyms. So you'll see that a lot of books came out under this pseudonym, 편집부. 어느 회사 편집부도 아니에요. 그냥 편집부. And also, if you want to hide your identity, but you want to make a statement, what do? Well, you join an organization whose purpose, whose platform you agree with. Actually, one such group, right now there is a very famous group like that. And that group happens to be named Anonymous too. You know, the hacker group, right? Nobody knows who the members are. We don't even know how many members there are. They just name themselves anonymous, and their goal is, you know, to fight against the tyranny of capitalism. So the court says the reason for the decision in NAACP versus Alabama was that identification and fear of reprisal might deter perfectly peaceful discussions of public matters of importance. This broad Los Angeles ordinance is subject to the same infirmity. Right? You will not just prejudice your readers, but you might actually be subject to retaliation. So you should be allowed to speak anonymously. Macintyre versus Ohio. This case 35 years later. Ohio statute prohibited the distribution of campaign literature that does not contain the name, address of the person issuing the literature. 이것도 이제 실명제죠. 이거는 선거 유인물 실명제. The court in a 7-2 decision invalidated the ordinance. The court says, the second paragraph at the bottom, when a law burdens core political speech, we apply exacting scrutiny. So the court first says, hey, tally apply to all handbills, right? Not just political handbills, but all handbills. Here, Macintyre, it applied only to campaign literature. 선거운동용. 선거용이 아니라 선거운동용이구나. 선거운동용 유인물에만 실명제를 적용한 거죠. But still, when a law burdens core political speech, 그러니까 오하이오 오하이오 이제 검찰총장이겠죠. 오하이오 주법이 합헌이다라고 이제 주장을 해야 되는 거니까 검찰총장이 텔리는 모든 유인물에 대해서 실명제를 한 거라서 위헌이지만 우리는 뭐에 대해서만 선거운동용 캠페인 리터처에 대해서만 한 거기 때문에 이 적용을 해보자면 밸런싱을 하자면 침해당하는 사익이 더 적다 이렇게 얘기를 하려고 하니까 수프림 코트가 뭐라고 하냐면 When a law burdens core political speech, we apply exacting scrutiny anyway. 거기 다시 strict scrutiny라는 걸 알 수 있죠. 왜? 선거운동은 정치적 표현이기 때문에. The state argues that the disclosure requirement is justified. Now the standard of review is set, right? Then now we have to look at what the interests are, whether they are compelling, and also the state actions are necessary for those compelling interest. What does the state say? First, the state asserts an interest in providing the electorate 유권자들이죠, with the relevant information. The court says, this interest does not justify a state requirement that the writer make statements or disclose she would not otherwise omit. 그러니까 오하이오 입장에서는 실명제를 해야 사람들이 책임 있는 선거 운동 유인물을 만들 거 아니냐. 그죠? 그렇게 얘기하니까 대법원에서 뭐라 그래요? People are intelligent, page 175, the second line. People are intelligent enough to evaluate the source of an anonymous writing. They can evaluate its anonymity along with its message. 익명으로 된 게 있으면 사람들이 뭐 신뢰를 덜 하거나 알아서 할 거다. 왜 익명으로 올라오는 거는 다 가치가 없을 거라고 생각을 하냐. Second, the state asserts an interest in preventing fraud and libel. 앞에 거랑 비슷한 얘기죠. 거기에 대해서는 뭐라 그래요? 대법원에서. 여기 이제 위헌이라고 하는데 지금 오하이오주에서는 익명으로 이렇게 유인물 할 수 있게 하면 그걸로 사람들 사기도 치고 명예훼손도 하고 그러면 무책임한 그런 표현들이 난무할 텐데 그걸 막기 위해서 필요한 거다. 물론 어차피 선거법 위반을 할 사람들은 익명으로 그냥 해버리겠죠. 대신 잡히면 명예훼손하고 선거법 위반으로만 명예훼손하고 사기로만 처벌되는 게 아니라 또 뭘로 처벌돼요? 익명 리플레이팅을 한 죄로. 그 위험 때문에 because of that added punishment, people will refrain from leafleting. So that way people will leaflet more truthfully and without causing harm. And to that, what does the court say? The court says, page 175 to 46, sixth line, Ohio does not, however, rely solely on this statute to protect that interest. Its election code includes detailed and specific prohibitions against making or disseminating false statements during political campaigns. Ohio's prohibition of anonymous leaflets plainly is not its principal weapon against fraud. 3 lines down. Although these ancillary benefits are assuredly legitimate, we are not persuaded that they justify the statute's extremely broad prohibition. 자, 헌법의 비례성의 원칙 4가지죠. 목적의 정당성, 방법의 적정성, 법익의 비례성, 침해의 최소성. 여기서는 뭐라고 하고 있어요? 뭐를 위반했다는 거예요, 대법원은? And why is the court saying it's too broad?
It's not its principal weapon against fraud.
Right. So which of the four elements? 필요성의 원칙, the rule of proportionality에서 한국헌법에서 어떤 컴포넌트를 위반한 거예요? 침해의 최소성. 그렇죠. Okay, preventing fraud and defamation, libel is okay. 목적의 정당성, check. 방법의 적정성. 뭐 실명으로만 해야 되면 사람들이 더 책임성 있게 하겠죠, check. 법익의 비례성. 뭐 그건 그렇다고 치고. 뭐 침해 최소성. Hey, there is less broad measure. What is it? Well, 사후제재, ex post restriction. So you punish only the people who actually liberated fraud and libel. But here, the law applies to who? Everybody. Even the ones stating truth. Even the ones stating truth have to state their names. That's why it's so broad. And if you look at the syllabus, I asked you to read the English version of let's see. Of Internet Real Name Law, and well, Internet Real Name Law decision of the Korean Constitutional Court. Actually, no, I didn't give you that. I actually gave you a Korean paper. Okay, I'll give you something else. Anyway, so the Korean Constitutional Court also struck down Internet Real Name Law for the same reason. That is too broad. That it requires everybody, even people intending no harm on internet, have to register their names and show their identities. What will happen if people have to register their identities? Well, they will be chilled. They'll suffer chilling effect. Means they'll be afraid of possible retaliation or even akpul, right? And they'll just not comment at all, even if what they wanted to do originally was a lawful comment. Okay, let's take a break. Now, one of the hidden holdings, one of the hidden judgments within Macintyre versus Ohio is a finding that this requirement of unmasking 가면을 벗는다는 얘기죠. 그러니까 showing the identity, right? The requirement of unmasking. This is content regulation. Okay. This is important because now all regulations on free speech are subject to strict scrutiny. Not all. The content regulations are. But the ones regulating time, place, manner, 시간, 장소, 방법, they are subject to lower scrutiny. For instance, decibel regulation on street, right? You cannot, when you speak on street, you cannot speak at a decibel higher than certain level. That's not subject to strict scrutiny because it goes only to the time, place, manner, right? Now, the requirement that when you publish, when you distribute leaflet, you have to add your name. Is that about content or is it about time, place, manner? Which one is being restricted? Content or manner? 내용 규제냐 방법 규제냐 따라서 그 심사 기준이 달라지는 거는 뭐 당연하겠죠. 예를 들어서 뭐 시간, 그러니까 지금 그 소음 규제 또 얘기를 했지만 뭐 예를 들어서 길거리에 그 세우는 광고판 규제도 다 그거 다 방법 규제거든요. 내용 규제가 아니고. 그렇다면은 이름을 공개하고 뭔가 퍼블리싱을 하라는 거. Is that content regulation or time, place, manner regulation? Depending on how you categorize it, it will be subject to either strict scrutiny or lower intermediate scrutiny. You already know the answer because here the court said it will be subject to strict scrutiny. So the court has decided that requiring the author to disclose his name, it is content regulation, right? Now, once it is a content regulation, it goes into this interesting question of whether it is prior censorship. 사전검열. 사전검열은 어느 나라나 다 위헌이거든요. 미국도 마찬가지고 한국도 사전검열은 위헌이죠. 사전검열은 뭐예요? 내용을 미리, 그렇죠? 국가 권력에 의해서 the state power, right, reviewing the content beforehand to decide whether to allow publishing or not. Right? Here, the requirement is not being really reviewed, right? Reviewed by any person, but the requirement is there. The content has to include the author's name. Otherwise, it cannot be published. Do you think it is prior censorship? What do you think? Almost in all major countries, prior censorship is per se illegal. It's illegal in itself. You don't need to do this balancing, public versus private. Once it is considered prior censorship, it becomes quickly illegal. I mean, unconstitutional. Do you think this is prior censorship, this requirement of unmasking? Well, what are the 4 requirements of prior censorship under Korean constitutional law? By actually administrative power, 행정권에 의한 내용, content review, 둘, 그리고 prior to publication, fourth, review that can result into banning the publication. Right? If the review results only in rating, right? If the review only results in like classifying above 18 years old, below 15, well, there's no below 15, above 15 years old, if it results only in rating, then it is not unconstitutional. So there are those rating programs already, game rating, motion picture rating, right? Film. 그래서 영화하고 게임, 내가 보기엔 그 두 개만 있는 것 같은데 지금 사전 검열을 하는 건. Both of them are constitutional because they cannot make a decision not to publish. They can make only decision to rate it as adult, above 18, or rate as X-rated. Okay, so that was a little bit of a Korean constitutional law for you. Now, if the Korean Constitutional Court faced a decision, what do you think they would do? What do you think they would do? Would they find prior censorship in this unmasking law? Actually, you can read up on that because the Korean Constitutional Court deciding on the Internet real name law faced that argument. I was part of the legal team. We made the argument that this is prior censorship. In the decision, the court said it's not prior censorship because nobody is actually reviewing the content, and it's not being done by any administrative body. But the court said, although it is not prior censorship, it is prior restraint. Because anybody writing anything online has to meet this prior requirement of submitting his name and resident registration number. 그때는 주민등록번호도 같이 넣었어야 되니까. So it is prior restraint. It is not prior censorship. 그러니까 곧바로 위헌이 되는 사전검열은 아닌데 사전적인 제한이다라는 표현을 사전적인 제한. 그래서 이런 사전적인 제한일 때는 공권력으로 창출하려는 공익이 명백해야 된다 이렇게 얘기를 해요. 그러면서 위헌 결정을 해요. 다시 public private 그걸로 넘어가서 이 밸런싱으로 넘어가서 우선 실명제 인터넷 리얼네임 로로 진짜로 악플이 많이 줄었는지 그리고 악플 줄이는 게 그렇게 중요한 건지 그 분석을 하고 근데 이게 퍼블릭이 프라이빗보다 훨씬 더 커야 합헌이 되는 거잖아요. 그죠? 근데 실제로 악플이 많이 줄었는지 잘 모르겠다. It's not clear whether the aimed public interest is actually being achieved by the state requirement of unmasking. Now, on the left side, on the private interest side, it is the private interest that's being infringed is anonymity and okay, all right, strike that. What I meant to say was that it is not prior censorship, but it is prior restraint, and because it is prior restraint, the public interest being achieved must be clearly shown, but it was not clearly shown. But on the private side, it's being applied to everybody, not just the ones spreading falsity, but even to innocent people. So, innocent people are being asked to submit their names, and they'll just stop writing just because they don't want to, they don't want to be target of other people's, offensive remarks, offensive comments, or just because they felt offended and having to submit their names just to speak online. That's what I did. I didn't write anything on Naver once internet real name law was in effect, because I just didn't want to. I thought it was just I felt offended, insulted, that you have to submit your name just to write something online. It's like you go to a park or you get on a bus. If the bus driver asks you your name and your registration number, how would you react? He does not need to know, right? He'll say, oh, because a lot of crimes happen on the buses, right? Like pickpocketing, 소매치기, violence on bus. Some people hit drivers. That's why we are checking all the names and numbers. Okay, well, if the risk of violence is that high, yes, sir, I understand, but it's not that high. It's not high enough to justify requiring all the bus riders to go real name, right? So just wanted to show you how the constitutional balancing is used. So Macintyre, okay, compare. And the Macintyre court thought that it was content regulation, didn't talk about whether it's prior censorship or not, but just thought that the requirement of adding the names, adding the real names, is a content regulation, and they just applied the strict scrutiny and turned it down there, struck down the law there. The Korean Constitutional Court talked about whether it's prior censorship and said it's not prior censorship, and yet it is prior restraint, and it requires compelling governmental interest. So there, it kind of, raised standard of review there. It required the public interest to be clearly demonstrated. And struck down the law that way. And both courts thought that requiring unmasking for everybody is just too broad. The Korean Constitutional Court went as far as saying, you are like treating people as potential criminals. Just like, when a bus driver asks you to give him your name when you get on the bus, you'll feel offended. Yes, there are some crimes, but do you really have to get all the names of everyone riding the bus? Now, there is a public transportation that gets the name of every rider. Airplane. Well, there is a reason for it, because airplane is much more dangerous. But bus is another matter, right? Okay, so that is for anonymity, which is a big part of internet freedom of speech. The second part, of internet freedom of speech is page 177, 178, 179, 180. This is ACLU versus Miller. No, actually, no, this is not the second part. This is, actually, I didn't assign this case for you. You don't have to read it. You don't have to read it. Let's go to page 183, Bantam Books versus Sullivan. Again, another long case. Sorry about that, but that's what it is. And then ACLU versus Reno. So let's talk about Bantam Books versus Sullivan first. What happened in this case? What happened in this case? There is a commission to encourage morality in youth. What a great name. Commission to encourage morality in youth. What does the commission do? Commission looks at the books that are published, that are in the market, and then sends letters to the book distributors right? Saying, oh, these books are harmful to youth. And the court struck it down as unconstitutional. Why though, right? Why was it struck down? So look at the letter here, page 185. Page 185, the left column. This agency was established by legislative order in 1956 with the immediate charge to prevent the sale, distribution, or display of indecent and obscene publications to youth and 18 years of age. 여기 SIS라고 되어 있는 건 이제 여기 잘못 썼다는 거죠. Youth under 18 years of age. 근데 지금 and라고 좀 잘못 써 있는 거고. The Commission has reviewed the following publications and by majority vote have declared that they are completely objectionable for sale, distribution, or display for youth under 18 years of age. The chiefs of police have been given the names of aforementioned magazine with the order that they are not to be sold, distributed, or displayed to youth under 18 years of age. Attorney General will act for us in case of a non-competent commissioner. Trust that you will cooperate with this agency in their work. Okay, this is the letter that they sent. So probably distributors will pull these books from shelves, right? What's wrong with this, right? What's wrong with the government finding some books not suitable for children and just kindly asking the bookstores not to sell those books? What does the court say? Page 188. Right column all the way at the bottom. Herein lies the vice of the system. The Commission's operation is a form of effective state regulation superimposed. 위에 중복됐다 이런 얘기입니다. Superimposed upon the state's criminal regulation of obscenity and making such regulation largely unnecessary. In thus obviating the need to employ criminal sanctions, the state has at the same time eliminated the safeguards of criminal process. So what the court is saying is that there is obscenity law already. obscenity law도 두 개가 있죠, 보통. obscene even to adults가 있고 obscene to children. So there is a law that says if you distribute obscene material to children, it will be criminally punishable. So the court is saying, hey, we already have this law, obscene to children, but here the state is doing something else. To charge somebody with obscenity, you have to go through the criminal process. And criminal sanctions may be applied only after a determination of obscenity has been made in a criminal trial. Hedged about은 이렇게 재단됐다는 얘기죠. 이렇게 세밀하게 재단됐다는 얘기. Hedged about with the procedural safeguards of the criminal process. 형사소송은 어떻게 공정하게 사실 판단과 법리 판단을 할 수 있을지 아주 복잡한 규정을 가지고 있습니다. 근데 그런 것들 전혀 없이 불법 여부를 이 커미션 투, 그러니까 청소년 윤리위원회 같은 거죠. 그러니까 청소년 윤리진흥위원회 같은 거. 우리나라로 번역하자. 이런 거지. 간행물 청소년 윤리진흥위원회 같은 거죠. The Commission's practice, criminal sanctions may be applied only after determination of sin, blah, blah, blah. The Commission's practice is in striking contrast in that it provides no safeguards whatever against the suppression of a non-obscene and therefore constitutionally protected matter. It is a form of regulation that creates a hazard to protected freedoms markedly greater than those that attend reliance upon the criminal law. Okay. Provides no safeguards. What does it mean? No safeguards. Or in a criminal system, can the defendant present its defense? Here, the publisher is not given a chance to speak, right? And also, the meeting is not open to people. They just meet, decide, right? So, you can see the court has a great concern about non-judicial body making the decision. Go below. What Rhode Island has done, paragraph right below, what Rhode Island has done, in fact, has been to subject the distribution of publications to a system of prior administrative restraints, since the Commission is not a judicial body and its decisions to list a particular publication as objectionable do not follow judicial determinations that such publications may lawfully be banned. Right. All the way below, we have tolerated such a system only where it operated under judicial superintendence and assured an almost immediate judicial determination of the validity of the restraint. The system at bar includes no such saving features. On the contrary, its capacity for suppression of constitutionally protected publications is far in excess of that of a typical licensing scheme held constitutionally invalid by this court. There is no provision whatever for judicial superintendence before notice is issued, even for judicial review of the Commission's determination of objectionableness. The publisher or distributor is not even entitled to notice and hearing before his publications are listed by the Commission as objectionable. Moreover, the Commission's statutory mandate is vague and uninformative. statutory mandate는 이제 수권법률. 여기서 수는 이제 줄 수자죠. 권한을 주는 법률. It's vague and uninformative, and the Commission has done nothing to make it more precise. Publications are listed as objectionable without further elucidation. So, this so you should think about, so there is this line of cases that say administrative censorship is unconstitutional. It is an interesting concept, though. Think about it. So the courts really don't like executive branch making these decisions about something is legal or illegal. Now, I don't know whether you read other cases like Lovell versus Griffin on page 195. Page 195, Lovell versus Griffin, you don't need to read that. This is a 1938 case, which was the kind of the origin of prior censorship law of the world. 이게 이제 행정권이, so this is a typical case where the administrative body was going to review the contents of publication beforehand to decide whether it should be allowed to be published or not. Okay, the Supreme Court said this is just outright unconstitutional, and that was later followed by the Korean Constitution. 그래서 언론 표현의 자유에 허가제는 없다. 허가제는 인정되지 아니한다. 그 소스가 됐던 케이스고요. 뒤에 니얼 vs 미네소타도 요건 제가 나중에 설명을 할게요. But those are like American prior censorship laws. 미국의 사전검열 결정들인데 그 결정들 얘기를 왜 나 얘기를 하냐면 if you look at page 189 where it says hey, this is not a judicial body making the decision, blah blah blah, and then the court cites this Neal versus Minnesota, these prior censorship cases. But let's leave that out, because prior censorship, as we know, requires pre-publication action, right? But here, is this pre-publication action? No, right? They review only the books that are already out in the market. Okay? Now, Neal versus Minnesota. Okay, I can talk a little bit about Neal versus Minnesota too. Page 190. Page 201, Neal versus Minnesota. This is a case about whether the court can ban future publications. Okay, a newspaper has done something wrong in the past, but because of that, can the court ban future publications? The Supreme Court said no, unless page 202, 3 paragraphs, third paragraph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sixth line. The limitation has been recognized only in exceptional cases. 그래서 limitation이라는 거는 publication을 아예 막는 거. No one would question but that a government might prevent actual obstruction to its recruiting service or the publication of the sailing dates of transports or the number and location of troops. On similar grounds, the primary requirements of decency may be enforced against obscene publications. The security of the community life may be protected against incitements to acts of violence and the overthrow by force or orderly government. So for these reasons, the court can stop future publication. So you can see that even the court, when it comes to pre-publication action, pre-publication suppression, even the court has some limitation, right? So imagine how much limitation the executive branch, the administrative body have in stopping publication beforehand. But anyway, going back to Rhode Island, going back to Bantam Books versus Sullivan, I want you to focus not on this prior censorship issue, because this is not prior censorship clearly. Because here the commission is reviewing books after they were made available. Right? I mean, the reason prior censorship is so strongly prohibited by the Constitution is because it does not allow the contents to be evaluated by the people at all, right? That's the reason. Here, the books are made available, and then the commission says this is objectionable. And the court here says, the court tries to say this is prior censorship, but it's not really prior censorship. It is just that the court is just trying to build an argument that administrative body cannot decide whether certain publications are lawful or not lawful. But that's an interesting argument, because do you see other administrative bodies making lawful versus non-lawful decisions in other areas of government? For instance, who decides whether it's lawful for you to practice law or not after graduation? Department of Justice. They'll give you an exam. Only if you pass, they say, oh, it's lawful for you to practice exam. Or another way of saying it is they'll decide, they'll look at your answers and they'll decide whether you are good enough to practice law or not. That's an administrative body. And how about drugs? Food and Drug Administration. That's an administrative body. They give permission to sell drugs or not. So they also make a decision. Also the police. They'll stop you when you are driving recklessly or when you are speeding. They also make lawful or non-lawful decision. Lawful versus non-lawful decision. So what is the court talking about here? The court is saying that administrative body cannot act in the area of freedom of speech. In food and drug situation, there are immediate harms. When there is a traffic violation, there is immediate harm. But when it comes to speech, can you really rely on administrative bodies making these decisions. So if you really look at the United States and other countries that follow this logic of Bantam Books versus Sullivan, it's hard to find an administrative body making decisions of lawful versus non-lawful, lawful versus unlawful decisions on speech. The only exception is broadcasting. There is no now I want you to be aware that Korea has administrative agency in just about every area of speech. You have game rating agency, you have a motion picture rating agency, you have a publication 간행물윤리위원회, publication ethics commission, you have a Korean Communication Standard Commission, which also censors the internet. You have a Youth Protection Commission, 청소년 보호위원회, reviewing music. Individual songs are reviewed by Youth Protection Commission for their suitability for children. None of this exists in the US, except the broadcasting content regulator. Same thing in Japan. On this part of freedom of speech, Japan followed the same suit as the US. There is no administrative agency poking into an area involving freedom of speech. Germany has none, except the broadcasting. Now, I'm going to talk about why broadcasting is different next week. Next week, or probably end of the day on Friday when we have another class. But what do we have? We have Internet Censorship Board within Korean Communication Standard Commission, which does exactly what Rhode Island Youth Commission is doing. They review internet content without any safeguard. They don't contact the authors of the postings or the authors of the websites. They just do unilateral review and decide whether a certain posting is legal or illegal. And then ask not the authors, but the distributors of the content to take down that content. 예를 들어서 네이버 블로그에 내가 뭘 썼으면은 나한테 와서 이게 불법물이다, 아니다, 얘기를 하자 뭐 하는 게 아니라 ask Naver to shoot it down. So you should think about that constitutional dimension of internet regulation. This Friday, I'm going to talk about the third dimension of internet free speech. That's on Reno versus ACLU, page 208 through, sorry, it's another long case, 223, and then we have broadcasting. Well, just read what's in the syllabus, okay? I think we will go into broadcasting on Friday. I don't know whether Reno was assigned or not. Look at the syllabus, okay? Just read what's on the syllabus, and we'll talk on Friday. Okay? All right. Thank you.